Welcome back to another special episode of Milton Garden Path, and this is the second installment on Fletcher Steele. One of my favorite secret gardens in Milton is a Fletcher Steele garden that was designed in 1926 for Catherine and Philip Spaulding. It sits on a half acre of land and is currently owned by the Milton Garden Club. It's tucked away in the middle of a residential neighborhood, hidden by beautiful plantings and a brick wall. So let's come on, take a look, and I'll show you my secret garden. Welcome to my favorite secret garden in Milton, designed by Fletcher Steele, starting in 1926 and finishing about 4 years later for Catherine and Philip Spaulding. The history of this garden is Philip Spaulding was the head of the telephone company back when it was just one big, ginormous company, and his wife Catherine Spaulding was the president of the Milton Garden Club. So the Spauldings contracted Fletcher Steele to design a garden on their 10-acre estate. The house is no longer here. At the time, it was this beautiful Georgian mansion with over 10 acres of land. So when Fletcher Steele came in, he designed a garden that came off of their kitchen entryway. So much of the plantings in this garden were planted over 90 years ago today. So a lot of the elements are similar to that from Namkeg because he designed this garden around the same time. So we have linden trees that were very small, little sticks back in 1926. We have the boxwood, which is original. We have Andromeda, which is also original, and mountain laurel. So the bones of this garden have remained intact and thrive today. The garden was ultimately acquired around 2004 by the Milton Garden Club when the Archdiocese sold the land and sold the property. Because after the Spauldings passed away, the property was sold to the Archdiocese of Boston, and this is where they kept retired priests. So there's a little bit of change to the brick walls that were perhaps done by the priests as they resided here for a while. So the plantings that you see above this retaining wall are newer ones which were put in 2004 by the Milton Garden Club. This garden is presently owned by the Milton Garden Club, who acquired it in 2004 when the property was sold from the Archdiocese. So Fletcher Steele's original plantings were tree roses, but as we mentioned in the previous episode, the roses that he planted in the 1920s did not survive and are not around today. So with the help of Thayer Nursery and A. Thomas, we were able to plant new elements like the beautiful peonies, the iris, and the knockout roses. So that's why we have a lovely display today. The peonies thrive in here. As you see, there is no water source in this garden, so everything has to rely on Mother Nature in order to survive. I'm standing behind the bench where there's a photograph of Catherine Spaulding standing in a very similar spot 90 years ago. Behind me are two linden trees. When they were originally planted, they were nothing but little twigs. Today, as you can see, they're rather large. So these trees were never intended to get that large, but here we have them, and we're grateful to have them still alive. At the same time that he was building this garden, he was working with Mabel Choate at Namkeg, and Namkeg has an alley of linden trees, and when they did the restoration, that alley is much smaller scale and much more accurate to the scale of the linden trees. So take a look at these trees. They're pretty impressive, and when they bloom, They emit such a beautiful, beautiful fragrance. Also behind me is the brick wall, and in the brick wall is a black diamond pattern. That black diamond pattern is also seen on the walls of Nam Keg. So very similar elements that he used. So another interesting thing about the bricks that he used, even though this garden was built in the 20s, the bricks were taken from old broken down buildings from the 1800s. So Fletcher Steele liked to scour old salvage places and get old elements to make a place feel a little more antique. So it's a beautiful time of year to be in this garden. It's my little secret garden of Milton, and it's one of the very few that Fletcher Steele designed in Milton that are still in existence. In the previous episode, Daryl mentioned that Fletcher Steele designed 25 gardens in Milton. So this is just one of a handful that are left. So the Milton Garden Club, along with the Massachusetts Master Gardener Association, work together to sort of help preserve this so that its legacy continues. And it's part of Milton's history, and a nice history it is. I'm standing in the lower part of the garden bed. So behind me is this retaining wall made out of stone that is still here after 90 years. It's starting to crumble in spots, but at the time of Fletcher's design, it had the row of tree roses behind me. So now we've modified the roses as I mentioned before, and we've got the beautiful backdrop of the peonies and the iris, and then in a few weeks we'll have some hydrangea. So it's the same wall that Catherine Spalding stood on 90 years ago today. So I decided to stand where she stood, walk in her shoes, but hopefully that won't look the same. So now I want to show you another one of Fletcher's sort of signature styles, and that's the bowling green. As you've seen that he has boxwood in many of his designs, birch trees in many of his designs, and linden trees, he also created a bowling green. So you can almost close your eyes, picture the dashing gentlemen in their white linen and their straw hats, and the women in their parasols and their white cotton long dresses, playing a little bit of croquet. On a mirrored stone step down into the lower part of the garden. Right directly across from me is the same exact staircase that Fletcher designed, and in the center is a circular pattern of stone laid into the ground. This was part of his signature work in this particular garden. And now I'm going to walk into the bowling green. So the bowling green is lined with a brick wall. Again, it's the same bricks from the 1800s. Some of the plants are still alive that he originally planted, like the rhododendron, the yews, and the andromeda. And one of the things that Fletcher Steele liked to do is he'd like to draw your eye in. He would find that focal point that was interesting and direct your eye to it. So what he did with rhododendrons, he would start with a dark color and work his way to a lighter color, drawing you in into the back. So since the 1900s, the Garden Club has added a few elements. We added the iris, as that is something that he would have used, and we do have the plant lists. And when we get to replenishing that stock and looking for maybe some of the original species, we would revisit that as well. But the pillars are photographed quite a bit from the 1920s, and they're intact, and as are those stone steps. So take a look at the stone steps because they're lovely. The garden extends that way, and some of these trees were likely planted by the Archdiocese of Boston because those are not original to the garden. But you can imagine people just kind of lounging around, walking around in this half-acre garden. It's, to me, a nice little secret that's tucked away in Milton, and it is a gem that is worth preserving and protecting. I am standing underneath a 90-year-old mountain laurel, which in about a week or two will be bursting with white color, looking like snowfall. So this garden is so peaceful, and if it weren't for the help of some kind donors like John Driscoll, who mows the lawn for us, the master gardeners who help us weed and prune, and the Milton Garden Club members, it just would be crumbled again. So I hope you enjoyed this segment on Fletcher Steele and recognize that he was a very important landscape architect of his time and for Milton. So it's part of our history and it's part of the charm of being from a small town. So thank you for tuning in. If you'd like more information on Fletcher Steele, email me at miltongardenpath@gmail.com or find us on Facebook. There's also a book written by Robin Carson that's all about Fletcher Steele, and it's a wonderful book. So thanks for tuning in.